Organizations are the same way. They're alive. They are a category of scientific entity called the emergent intelligence, like an ant colony or like a human body. If you talk to a manager, though, they'll say, that's not true. I'm in control, invisible leader. Fred Taylor would have been like, what is Mary talking about? This is absurd. I am in control because I tell the worker to jump and the worker obeys. I send commands and they are followed. So I'm in charge. It's like, no, congratulations. You have a functioning nervous system. Well done. That's good. You say, oh, it's not good? I think it's really good to have a functioning nervous system. In an emergency, it's very useful to be able to send commands and have them be followed. Great, good job. But what about your organization's health? Can you command it? A lot of leaders think they can. And that's why they get into huge, huge trouble. They simply do not know how to bind the superorganism they lead to care about any specific thing. So just like human health, organizational health can be cultivated, but it cannot be commanded.
Here's the uncomfortable truth about AI. The gap isn't between companies, it's between leaders. Same tools, same access, same hype, but completely different outcomes. Why? Because AI exposes how you think. Your decision making, if it's unclear, AI will expose it. If your system is strong, AI compounds it. Across the executives I've worked with, from Slack to HSBC to American Airlines, the ones who win don't use more AI. They use it deliberately. They build a personal system, capture their thinking, pressure test their decisions, turn every interaction into a reusable asset. We call it the CSTA loop in action. And the results, they're pretty consistent. 3 to 4x more meaningful decisions, up to 60% less preparation time, and faster alignment across their teams. This isn't about becoming an AI expert, it's about becoming a better decision maker. All captured in our book, Artificial Organizations, out now.
Enjoying the podcast? Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube. This way, you won't miss any episode and it greatly supports our podcast.
Welcome to the Unlearn Podcast. On this show, I'm joined by Eric Ries, entrepreneur, author of The Lean Startup, and now the new book, Incorruptible. This conversation, we explored a simple but radical idea. What if building ethical businesses, mission-driven companies that aren't trading off against performance, but actually have the surest path to long-term prosperity? Eric and I dig into how leaders can redefine what profit really means, design organizations that don't lose their way as they scale, and use positive externalities and open ecosystems as the core strategy, not philanthropy or PR. We bring this to life through 3 powerful and often misunderstood stories. First is the Volvo and their seatbelt heist, Tony Chocolonely's and freeing child slavery for chocolate, and then the management thinker Mary Parker Follett and the invisible leader, who many people aren't even aware of. Along the way, we connect these stories to the open source as a strategy, the myth of solopreneurship, our hyper-efficient founder, why employee ownership, mission alignment, and real trust is one of the keys that drives performance over time. We're living in a moment obsessed with hyper-individual hustle stories, short-term private equity-style value extractions, and almost maximizing returns at any cost, be it ethical, human, and even environmental. On this show, Eric and I show ways that you can do that differently. If you're a founder, an executive, or a builder who senses that business as usual is broken, but still want to win in the market, this episode's for you. So let's get into it. Well done again on another book. But what really struck me, Eric, about this one is I was open at going, okay, Incorruptible, what is this going to be about? I literally was going in with a sort of open, blank mind. And then what probably blew me away is just how much research and work you've done to uncover these examples. I was someone who I wouldn't say pride myself, but I feel like I've heard a lot of the classic sort of stories about this. But I was literally going this is in the 1800s. How the hell did you go and find some of these examples, first of all? And, what was that sort of inspiration to really dig deep, I think, for these really helpful examples from the past, really to inform people where we're at today?
Oh, it's nice of you to say. Yeah, I did do an exceptional amount of research for this book, and I had a research team, and I burned out multiple researchers who were like, this is just too much. This is too much, okay? I can only do so much. It was a lot. We went really deep. And the frustrating part about, writing these books, the vast majority of the research is never used. So the ratio of case studies you go deep on to case studies that make it into the final text is like 10 to 1. So it was very difficult to find just the right stories to illustrate the points, and to also find stories that worked with each other, so that as a whole collective set, it makes sense. I'm not actually a very good academic, so I couldn't do this research. I don't have that skill set to really do true academia. But one of the skills that I have is that as I read stuff over the years and meet people, and as I accumulate information, just when I encounter an interesting story, it sticks with me. So I've noticed that when I'm working with companies, when I'm talking to leaders, when I'm doing the work, I often have at my recall, I'll just be in this odd situation and my brain will provide, that's actually a good story that illustrates this point. You should, you can use it. So I feel like I've built up through my own work and through, all the reading and research that I've done, like a kind of a library of stories that illustrate the points. So I'm very used to using stories to illustrate concepts. And I guess I have this obscure hobby. This is a topic that I've been interested in for like 5 or 10 years, for a really long time. So it means I've read a lot of books about it. For example, you asked about like the story in Scotland in 1800. That story, I originally encountered it in a book called The Enlightened Capitalists by James O'Toole, which is not a book that I think is especially well known or popular, but it's very good, and it's a case study method book. That's just one story after another of companies losing their way, losing their basically trying to build like a moral company and having it fail in the marketplace, not because it wasn't successful, but because of these other forces, obviously, that I'm writing about. But that book, and for many years, I recommended that book to entrepreneurs, but it wasn't effective for most of them because it's a big, thick book with lots and lots and lots and lots of points. And he's a business journalist. He's not trying to make a prescription. He's just trying to analyze this point. And I think to a lot of people who work in this area, the question of whether companies can or can't do this is considered an open question. So he's like, look, I'm providing you this evidence that it doesn't seem to work. And maybe these people aren't really sincere. Maybe, he's like not really taking a stand to say, this is right, this is wrong. So it's more neutral. And of course, for founders, it's a terrible book from that point of view. It's really depressing. It's like reading imagine reading like a book of spooky ghost stories for scaring young kids around the campfire, right? Imagine reading a book like that was written in a neutral tone, that it, like when somebody gets spooked by the ghost, it's like written as if it's not sure if that's good or bad. It would be actually it would be very disturbing. So that's what it's like as an entrepreneur trying to unearth these stories. They're actually often not told, and they're not reported on from the framework of what can we really learn from this? How do we make sure that we never see this happen again? So yeah, I feel like I was lucky enough to be able to draw on so much prior work that journalists and academics and all these people have done that came before me, and to synthesize that work was really the project.
Yeah, no, and it's great, right? Like for me, I was literally almost struck by how dense it is. There's just so many things in there. I was literally reading some of these early drafts, going okay, this is a lot of information to sort of challenge the thinking, right? But again, what we want to do today is I want to pick these examples that are kind of fun. They're really counterintuitive, but I think these are things that can really help leaders, because it feels more like a set of principles that they can start to say, well, what does that look like in my business? And that's what I enjoyed about how you put the book together, right? It's not saying thou shalt need to do this. It's not so directive, but it's just packed with loads of lessons, right? So the first one we're going to do is Volvo, which is the day they gave away the crown jewels, which one of these ideas, so we have an early stage AI incubator, Nobody Studios. We're building companies all the time. I cannot tell you how many people show up to the incubator telling us they want to work with us, but they can't tell us about their idea. We need to sign 7 million NDAs. We've actually even built a company called Valify, where you upload your business idea and it runs a check against 200 million patents in 170 different jurisdictions and gives you feedback in a minute, whether your idea is actually impeding IP. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the greatness of the Volvo story? For all those Volvo owners out there, they're probably going to feel vindicated for that choice that they made buying that car many years ago.
Sure, yeah. In the book, I call it the Volvo Heist. Because if you go to business school, you will encounter this story. It's not like a secret that nobody knows. Volvo, was a very small regional automaker in Sweden. Today, it's a gigantic company, and it's a brand that's worth like, I don't know, 10 billion euros or something like that. Just the Volvo brand alone is incredibly valuable because today Volvo means safety. But that wasn't really part of its founding story at all. It was just a regular old regional automaker, doing the same as every other automaker. And if you get taught the story in business school, they almost always teach it like this. An engineer at Volvo kind of spontaneously invented this seatbelt.
It's like the Post-it note story. Someone tripped over.
Yeah. It's just like it just happened. It's just this guy happened to come up with this invention of the 3-point harness seatbelt, the shoulder strap seatbelt, based on the designs that were used at that time in fighter pilots. Before that, most cars either had no seatbelt at all or just had a lap belt. Very, very poor safety construction, and so people were dying left and right in cars in preventable deaths. Volvo, in an act of civic altruism, decided to patent the seatbelt invention, but then they gave the patent away for free. They open sourced it and allowed everybody else. And wasn't that a nice ethical thing for Volvo to do? And this story doesn't really make sense in hardly any way at all. Like, it's just funny that it's taught this way when it doesn't make sense. And more importantly, it is not useful in any way to leaders. Because notice that there's no leader in this story.
Yeah, it's just the amorphous.
This thing happened, and then what? Then the company decided this weird Swedish thing. And if you ask, like, why did they give it away for free? They're like, how Swedish people are. Like, it's like, it's not explained. And the story is full of contradictions. Like, if they were going to give it away, why did they patent it? Like, right? Like, so I've always been curious about this story. I wanted to learn more about it, And if you dig into the story, it's way more interesting than the like standard way that it's taught. Now, unfortunately, one of my dreams of this book was to get access to the Volvo research archives. Like, they have the corporate minutes of these meetings, like are preserved somewhere in some archive somewhere in Volvo, but they're very protective of stuff. Yeah. So, but the academics who study Volvo have never bothered, as far as I can tell, to go look at these archives because it's not considered very interesting. But to me, the question of this whole story is, we see it from the point of view of like the consumer. Oh, we're so glad they did this. But I want to understand the story from the point of view of the Volvo shareholders. There must have been a board meeting where this was discussed. And what was going on? And the CEO comes to the meeting and says, "Hi, everybody, we have this breakthrough new invention, and we got the patent, and now we're going to give it away to our competitors for free. Thanks for coming." Did not a single person say, "Excuse me, why don't we license it for money? Why don't we keep it as our exclusive proprietary advantage?" Like, the way the story is told, it's incomprehensible. But if you rewind the tape and understand what really happened, you might ask yourself, Niels Bohlin was the famous engineer. How did he wind up working at Volvo? Oh, turns out he was the first ever safety engineer hired by an auto company who opened the job rec. Like, oh, that's interesting. Whose idea was it? It turns out that the CEO at the time, his name was Gunnar Englau, I think, if I'm saying it right. He had a relative, I think it was like his sister-in-law, somebody close to him had died in a car accident. And here he is, the CEO of an auto company, and he was like, that doesn't seem right. There must be a better way. And so he had the far-sighted idea that safety could be part of the strategy of a car company. Who would have thought? If you hear people talking about AI safety today, you might be like, where's our far-sighted leaders, He conceived the idea. He conceived the idea. He hired the engineer, and according to some versions of the story, he even suggested that he go study like fighter pilots and other stuff. So like this was not some random invention. This was a strategic choice by a far-sighted leader. They have the breakthrough. They do the patent, and the record is completely silent about what happened at the board meeting. None of the people involved, as far as I can tell, were ever interviewed, or no one's ever even asked, why did you give this away? Was there any pushback? So in the book, I had to ask, like, we have to just imagine this from the point of view of the Volvo investors. And of course, I don't really care what happened to Volvo all those years ago. What really matters is how would modern boards react? If you said, hey, I got this breakthrough, I want to give it away for free. Why? Now, here's why. What's interesting to me is the specific mechanics of what I call the prosperity cascade. You see this in a lot of situations where an individual company decides to take an action like this, an altruistic action, that causes the rest of the industry to react in predictable ways that eventually winds up cementing some standard or value that the company has. It's an act of what I call mission transmission. So Volvo open sources the patent. Well, as soon as they do that, they make it basically inevitable that some auto manufacturer somewhere would give it a try because it's just a free upgrade to their cars. And they can start to say it has this seatbelt. That's something that customers want. So they put it in the Volvo cars, of course, but Volvo wasn't selling that many cars, so it wasn't that big a deal. But what mattered was, like, I think it was Volkswagen was one of the first to start putting it in cars, and then some American companies did. So in America, all of a sudden there's some seatbelts on the road, 3-point seatbelts on the road. What happened next is not the government stepped in to say everyone wears seatbelts. That took a long time. The next thing that happened is the insurance industry had just created the first National Highway Safety Consortium, is called, where they were aggregating claims loss data for auto accidents because the auto insurance was becoming more and more and more expensive, and the total cost of ownership of a car was going up. But people weren't happy about it, but that's because it was so expensive to insure these cars. And so the auto industry noticed that people wearing these weird safety belts didn't die in the car accident, and therefore their losses were a lot less. So they started offering incentives in terms of lower premiums if you would wear a seatbelt. That meant the total cost to own a car with a seatbelt in it all of a sudden went down. And now the companies that previously, when they had asked, like people would always ask, think about how many companies today, when you're like, why don't you do the safety thing? They're always like, what ads cost, we can't afford to do it, all the same lame excuses we hear all the time. All of a sudden, those same companies who previously said it was too expensive to add seatbelts now found it too expensive not to have it. Yeah. And so this became a voluntary industry-wide standard long before it was reified as federal legislation in the US and around the world. People estimate that the seatbelt patent being given away saved something like 1 million lives.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great pattern. The thing it reminds me of, in the early days of sort of cloud computing, like Amazon were building out the platform at a pace, but one of the real pioneers of usage of the platform at the time was Netflix. And Adrian Cockcroft, he's been on the show, he's a great friend and mentor. He was the head of cloud computing for Netflix. And one of the ways that they were thinking about how they could influence what not only Amazon would build on the cloud platform, but they could influence the way the industry went, is they started building loads of small little products that were like gaps in the cloud computing market and plugging them with open sourcing the software that they were using internally to build out the system.
Yeah.
And that was really interesting, again, both from Amazon's point of view, because they could see if these open source packages gained loads of traction, like that was a plug that the market was demanding, and they could potentially even drive their roadmap on it. But it was also a way for Netflix to influence the work that they wanted the cloud computing industry to go, right? And I think these are sort of like great strategies that sometimes entrepreneurs, like they just don't hear these sort of thinking.
They don't
right?
hear
It's
them, and we
still
only
the way
teach
to
them
go.
as these weird examples of corporate social responsibility. And like by doing that, we are systematically blinding ourselves to the strategic advantages of pursuing positive externalities as a strategy. So going back to Volvo one last time, people say, well, Volvo's brand is synonymous with safety. And the seatbelt is not the last thing like this that Volvo's done. Once they did it once, they keep doing it. And in fact, later generations, we're on several generations of managers where I think Gunnar Anglau retired from Volvo like 50 years ago. Like this has been an enduring part of the Volvo story because the same economic logic that caused this cascade locked Volvo into this positioning. If they don't keep doing it, then the magic breaks. Like it's actually now later managers are able to see that this is something they have to keep doing. They have to be the safety conscious brand. So this was not a giveaway, it was an investment. And the trustworthiness that it bought Volvo is why it's the only like regional automaker from that time even still around, let alone one of the most valuable brands in the world. So you see this in open source a lot. I've been trying to get companies to open source their software since I was a kid. I mean, it's just, to me, it always seemed naturally right. But when you actually try to do it in real life, companies want to ask, what is the ROI of doing this? And they can only see the liabilities, the risks. They can't really see the returns. When Linus Torvalds, forget open sourcing Linux, but when he open sourced Git, he created multiple multi-billion-dollar companies. He didn't actually even own. He didn't even care. He created so much value in the world through this action. Yet most people cannot imagine doing something like that could ever be value creating because we're so focused on what will maximize our value capture.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a very localized sort of view, right? Or probably just what people are thought, right? Any asset you create, you have to monetize it. That's pretty much what 99% of the
Yeah,
guidance
even if
is
we're
out
really
there.
bad at monetizing it. And even if the
Yeah,
act of monetizing it makes it less valuable, we still have to try. It's our fiduciary duty. Yeah.
yeah, it's a classic. All right, let's talk about Tony Chocolonely. This is another great one. I don't know
Oh, I
how to
love it.
say
I'm
it
glad
right.
you're asking me about some of the deeper cuts from the book. I love these stories. They're so
Yeah,
great.
they're great, right? The chocolate that
Yeah.
refused to compromise, like that's what so it's funny. I love food and beverage sort of stories, right?
Yeah.
When I worked at ThoughtWorks, we got the Ben and Jerry's founders to come in because we were trying to come up with the values of the company, and they had these great sort of values that were basically run a sustainable business, have some sort of like industry innovation, and then social and economic justice, right? That was generally the sort of Ben and Jerry's, and then they obviously innovated by removing hormones from animals that would go into
Sure,
their
yeah.
products, right? So we were building software, so we were like, hey, look, these seem like some good folks. We want to have a sustainable business. We want to do tech innovation and have social and economic justice. But Tony Chocolonely, which I just love this name, right, is really this idea of the false trade-off of ethics versus performance. And we had to deal with that a lot, where we would turn down certain companies we didn't want to work with when we were in ThoughtWorks, specifically because they weren't ethics aligned to us.
Yeah.
So tell
I
us a
like the
little
story a
bit
lot
about
because
this.
it has a great, the origin story is just amazing. And it's just such a classic entrepreneur story. So the founder of Tony's, he was a journalist. He was a TV journalist in the Netherlands. And he had done this big expose. I can't remember what year the expose was. 2002. Okay, so this is like 20 years ago. They had done this investigative journalism report on child slavery in the cacao supply chain. And it was really a riveting and terrible expose because there's a lot of child labor all up and down the supply chain, as is true for many modern supply chains. So it's really brutal. And the Netherlands is one of the top chocolate consuming countries in the world. So he really was, I think, expecting that something would happen as a result of his journalism. People would be outraged and they would want to do something about it. And basically nothing happened. And he was really upset. So upset that he tried to get the authorities to arrest him for eating chocolate. He demanded, it was like a classic publicity stunt. He demanded that he be arrested for child slavery for eating chocolate. He said, if we know for sure that the chocolate is being produced by child labor, then why are we not complicit? Why is it not a crime to eat it? And he did this whole thing, tried to get himself arrested. The government obviously was not going to arrest him. It was an impossible situation. They had to arrest the whole population of the Netherlands. There's just no way. So the reason that he was so depressed as a result of this episode, he said later, is he felt like everyone said the reason why you can't do anything about this is the public doesn't care. But, he just didn't believe that. First of all, that's not really the Dutch values. But he just was like, that's not human values. I bet people do care. They just don't have a choice. So as an MVP, like in a classic MVP, he just announced that he and his TV production team were going to produce 10,000 or 5, I can't remember what it was, a certain number of fair trade certified chocolate bars. It was like, I don't think they even had the bars. They just announced, it was like a classic like crowdfunding thing. Like, we're going to announce 5,000 of these bars. And
Go. That's good,
do people want to buy them? They pre-sold 13,000 bars. So like they sold that in 2 days. There was like incredible demand for these fair trade chocolate bars. And they looked at each other and they're like, well, maybe the reason the public is indifferent is because no one's ever given them a choice. What if we did? So they left TV journalism and started a chocolate company. They called it Tony's Chocolonely. It took them 7 years to become the #1 chocolate brand in the Netherlands. And when you look at their website and their materials, they do a lot of very cool marketing things.
Yeah.
Now that I've told you this story, you're going to start to see them in like stores all there. They're growing a lot in the U.S. and you'll start seeing them everywhere now. Once I read this story for the first time, I was like, oh, look, there it is. And of course, now all my friends know to get me Tony's as a gift. So I've had a lot of Tony's chocolate since then. It's really good. What's interesting about it is their mission is not making chocolate. Their mission is to eradicate child slavery in the cacao supply chain. That's the mission. The chocolate is the mechanism by which they do this, by creating economic logic, economic power behind their own values. Again, the same kind of mission transmission as we saw with Volvo. So, they've been this huge and expanding chocolate brand. They pay higher than average wages in all the African countries where they work. They certify all the like cooperatives and collectives and production facilities as being child labor free. They invest an incredible amount of time and energy into finding children who are forced into labor in the supply chain. They spend a lot of money on education, and not just like sending kids to school, but educating the adults in villages. Like, what are the things you need to do to have a healthy educational environment for your kids? Why is this the right thing to do? They try to really make it the economically obvious thing to do. And they can't do this from the Netherlands. Most of the supply chains in Africa, so they have to work through local leaders. They train a lot of local folks to extend these values to the supply. So that's the first part of the story that's really cool. Just like a lot of the companies in the book, Tony's is organized around what they call Tony's mission block. So they actually have outside trustees who oversee this mission. They do a lot to make sure that this is not just greenwashing, but it's quite real. They put out an annual report. They've had to report on really embarrassing things. Like sometimes whenever they expand, they find more kids in child labor. So they often have to report bad news, like, oh, there's actually more cases that we found this year than last. But they don't care. They're like, look, that's not our job. Our job is not to make ourselves look good. Our job is to find the kids. That's the whole idea of it. What I think is especially interesting, though, going back to the Volvo example, is after a while, and they've been growing very, very fast, and they're, like I said, entering the US market doing well. But they just felt like that's not enough. We don't just want to be the biggest chocolate company in the world, and then all the other chocolate companies are still doing all this evil stuff. Our goal is to change the whole industry. So they created this thing called Tony's Open Chain, which I just thought was really interesting. They basically open source the whole supply chain that they have. They have an open platform, and they allow other companies, including their direct competitors, to source their ethical chocolate and use it in their own bars. One of their early customers was Mr. Beast. If you've eaten Feastable's chocolate, you have eaten Tony's chocolate. I thought that was really funny. And it's interesting to me is if you look at the packaging of a Mr. Beast chocolate, it doesn't say powered by Tony's Open Chain. Tony's not even mentioned. Mr. Beast brags about the ethical benefits of his supply, he uses this ethical chocolate. He claims Tony's brand attributes for his own without giving them any credit. And they don't care. But they do have a rule. Not anybody can just grab this supply chain and use it for whatever you want. The rule, they call it the no cherry picking rule. If you use this open chain, you have to commit that all your chocolate that you sell will meet Tony's ethical standards. You don't have to use open chain for it all, but you're not allowed to say, well, I'm just going to use it for my ethical chocolate bar and I'm going to have no, that's not allowed. So they've changed the economic calculus of a bunch of their competitors, especially like grocery stores who do private label chocolate. Like they haven't yet gotten the major competitors to switch over. That would be kind of conceding defeat for a lot of those companies. Those companies, by the way, have spent unbelievable amounts of money suing Tony, trying to get them to stop doing this. So it's like, rather than compete on a level playing field, they've tried to bring all kinds of tactics to bear, claiming that they're doing false advertising, claiming to be more virtuous than they really are. Judge threw the suit out, just being like, what are you talking about? It's absurd. But you see all this evidence of the attempts by the conventional system to bring the reform down. What I think is especially cool is they have made it just like those early auto companies that started to have to do seatbelts even though they didn't care about safety. They were doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. By changing the economic logic, Tony's has caused a lot of people who are in this business who are just looking for ROI to be like, wait a minute, why am I building out my own supply chain when it would be cheaper for me to do Tony's? And also because I can claim all these ethical benefits, I actually get higher return on my investment because customers are more likely to buy. I have all these examples of companies that have adopted it and used it and seen their sales grow, even though sometimes costs have to go up modestly. So I think again, it's an example of how when you build what I call a mission-locked constellation, which is like an attempt to influence a much broader sphere of control than just your narrow little for-profit concern, you not only expand the opportunities for mission transmission, you make your own business a lot bigger because you bring in all these allies together.
Yeah, no, it's great. I can't help but I'm sitting here thinking of like all good people in the tech world, a version of Silicon Valley, the TV show, where they're sitting there going, do good in the world, do good in the world, do good in the world. And so much of these statements are just painted on, as you say, right? Or
just mission statements, not real missions.
Exactly, and yet you see all these benefits when first of all, you plant a flag in a different position, whether it's just like our friend Tony's chocolate here, or
Totally.
Ben and Jerry's in the 70s, like these people who plot a different path and then can create a whole new category, right? And that's a powerful positioning to have. It's a bold positioning. And then if you build the highway behind you, that means more things are going to travel down that path, like you're explaining with Dr. Beast or Mr. Beast. So, what are some of the things then when you think about, and this is the thing I kept thinking about when I was writing this, is that they're still trying to be excellent at what they do, and they're still trying to hold on to an ethical choice. And I still see that people see that as a one or another. It's never an and.
Totally. Yeah. This is a very common indoctrination that we have all imbibed this ideology and we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
If you go to an economics class in a business school, you'll often be taught in Econ 101, a simple parable like this. They'll be like, well, let's say you run a plantation. I don't know why they always use these racist examples like plantations, but they often do. You run a plantation and you do it on ethical principles. You make sure that you pay people more than you have to, and you use organic ingredients, and you do everything for quality and safety, and you have the extra blah, 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 blah. Everything's going great. But the plantation down the street, they don't do any of that stuff. They are ruthless and they pay people like crap, and the people die while they're doing the thing and da-da-da-da-da, but they have a cheaper price. They undercut you on price. They pass the savings on to customers. They drive you out of business. And too bad, your high-minded principles have led to your demise. And that's why there's a race to the bottom. All companies ultimately have to be the most ruthless in their category or they'll be defeated. This is taught as an economic law, like a law of nature.
Yeah.
Absolutely not true. And if you could easily see how it's not true, but you realize they're smuggling in empirical assumptions into the parable, which may or may not be true depending on the situation. For example, notice in the parable that customers always pick the lowest cost provider.
Right.
Quality doesn't matter. Is that always true? Is it always true that quality doesn't matter? I don't know if that is true. You see that the lack of safety, the lack of integrity in your treating of your employees, does that always lead to lower costs? I would think that plantation is going to have much higher attrition. They're going to have all kinds of problems keeping a consistent safety standard. Deming would have been like, what are you talking about? That's not going to lower your costs. That's going to lead to higher costs, right? So we're assuming cause and effect without proof. And the most interesting thing is these same people who make this argument that this is just how business is, you can prove that they don't really mean it so easily. Because you just say, listen, I see here that you're paying this CEO $100 million a year. But the company down the street, they pay their CEO only $50 million a year and pass the savings on to consumers. Won't they undercut us on price and drive us out of business? And they're like, no, of course not. You got to pay a premium for that kind of talent. Oh, I see. So sometimes there's a business advantage for paying more for labor than you need to? I thought you just said it's always bad. Oh, interesting. So we have a double standard for those at the top and those at the bottom. Give me a break.
Yeah, no, I love it. You're making me smile, Eric. We're gonna call out some of the hypocrisy on the show today of what's going on in this industry.
No,
right?
it's just absurd. This is just ideology masquerading as economics. And so, if you look at the data, okay, if you actually want to look at the data, it shows that companies that are mission driven, companies that are trustworthy, customers that invest in their employees, companies that are employee owned, all these attributes are highly correlated with business success. So the idea that somehow you have to choose mission or profit is just fundamentally wrong. It is not supported by the research on this point at all. Just to pick on employee ownership for a second, it was this huge meta study of all the employee ownership business performance correlation studies that found that not only is employee ownership correlated with things like higher revenue growth, it exhibits dose response. The more employee ownership, the more of the benefit you get. It's like a very straightforward thing. And of course, people who have craft-oriented businesses, this is so obvious. Who would you want ultimately making the decisions here except for the people most invested in the craft? Like I'm a huge Taylor Guitars fan. I have 2 of them in my house. They converted their whole production to an employee stock ownership plan and an ESOP plan where the craftsmen, the craftspeople actually have the ownership say, not just to protect the company from being bought out by private equity, which all of us who love that product pray will never happen, but like they included their San Diego workforce and their Tijuana workforce. Everybody participating in the economic prosperity and upholding the quality standards. That's been, I can attest from as being a customer, that's been really good. Not just for their ethics and their social whatever, but it's been really good for the bottom line. And we have so many books on this point, so much research, right? Fred Reichheld called it good profits and bad profits. We have double bottom line and triple bottom line. I had a test reader who was like, you should just add an extra bottom line and have it be quadruple bottom. I was like, no, we don't need any more bottom lines. Instead, we should have only one bottom line. The one bottom line is, in fact, to make a profit, but we have to redefine what we mean by profit because the conventional definition of profit is blind to all these different problems, which you can learn in Econ 201 after you've imbibed these stupid stories in Econ 101. You'll eventually learn that the way we measure profit cannot see deferred liabilities. It cannot see negative externalities. And it's very easy for it to see a human life as a perfectly acceptable cost. An input factor of production is what they call it. So can I tell you a horror story?
Well, look, we started with kids' horror stories, so now we can move into adults ones and keep.
I mean, right? I just because I only just learned this story recently. I had heard from a friend that Panera Bread has been falling on hard times, and I wanted to know why. And I was like, I bet it's private equity. So I just Googled Panera private equity, and lo and behold, Panera Bread was bought out by private equity, and they have been systematically squeezing out all the cost of Panera Bread, which means they're also squeezing out all the quality of the product. So if you go on Reddit/Panera, people are like all up in arms about it. They got rid of the freshly baked sourdough. They reduced portion sizes. They expanded the menu. Anyway, it was like pretty standard private equity playbook of extracting value rather than trying to create value. But the thing that blew my mind, that I had not heard this story, but I had been like using a version of it as a hypothetical for years. They added something to the menu in pursuit of faster growth. They're like, we got to put something on the menu that's got more kick to it to make sure people will come in for repeat purchase more often. They put something called charged lemonade on the menu, which is a caffeine added lemonade product. It was sold next to in the soda dispenser next to the regular sodas, like where kids could get it. Oh, it had a glass of charged lemonade, apparently had 6 espressos worth of caffeine in it. And people died. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, how bad they had addicted thing. Like, people literally died. Now Panera's being sued by multiple people for being killed by charged lemonade. Of course, they had to take it out of it. Like, the reputational brand damage to Panera is going to turn out to be absolutely immense. How is all this being done in the name of making a profit? Well, we know why. Because the definition we're using is blind to externalities. And it's funny, normally we do this, most interviews we begin with the negative case, and then like, the positive case that we often don't even get to. I love that we've done this in the reverse. We've actually already seen this principle at work in Tony's, in Volvo, in all these open source stories. By being blind to positive externalities, not only do we cause a lot of social harms, we miss massive business opportunities that we would never otherwise consider. In fact, the thing I'm the most proud of so far with this book, a lot of things that I'm happy about it, but I had something, I don't know how many hundreds of people test read this book. You might have heard I'm big into feedback. Yep. So I had a lot of test readers for this book. Thank you. You were one of them and gave incredible comments, for which I'm very grateful. And I had, more than 10,000 comments to sort through. Like, it was really a lot of feedback. It was extremely helpful. But the thing I'm most proud of is that several of the test readers, I think we're up to 4 or 5 now, have called me to say, as a result of reading the book, I'm pursuing a business opportunity I never would have even considered before because I had the blinders on. And once I took the blinders off, I was like, wait a minute, here's a category. They're all kind of this form. Here's a category where everybody hates all the vendors. What if we had a vendor that was good and that people liked them and wanted to do? I was like, our grandparents would be like, is that a rare business plan? Like, is that not the basic thing you get taught in business? No, we don't teach that anymore. Now we do private equity roll-ups, and we try to drive people out of business, and we do all these like 12-dimensional chess, complicated plans. And we skip over the fact that we've built an economy where people who cut costs are rewarded and never held accountable for the brand and customer devastation that those cuts cause.
Yeah, no, I think there's a terrible side effect of the content that primarily goes out and is feeding up-and-coming entrepreneurs It's always driven by how much have you done with a short amount of time to maximize the most amount of money. And you flick through any of your feed, and it's like, I woke up, I built 10,000 agents, now I'm making $10,000 a day, but at what cost to anybody? It's very individualistic, right? And sadly, like, that is the role model story of the day, is like, how much can you as an individual maximize, your individual return, which just feels wrong, right? And, even we've seen this so much in our studio, like this idea of the $1 billion unicorn, one person company. And I can tell you that nobody builds anything on their own. Anything that's built that's great to last, there's always a team involved. There's always a group of people that bring it together, but yet that doesn't support the narrative that, it wants to be spinned around this individualism and, my individual success, so this brings us nicely maybe onto our next story, which is Mary Parker Follett, the invisible leader.
You're hitting all my favorites. This is great.
Yeah, come on, man. This is
We're going to get all the deep cuts are going to be in this episode. It's really good. Very different than the other episodes available.
Oh, well, that's good. That's why we're here. But this invisible leader running the company, right? So, and the illusion of control. It focuses on hierarchy rather than emerging behavior, right? So this is my jam all day. I know we all like jamming. You've got your Taylor guitars. I've got a different brand. I've got my Martin in the back.
Oh, that's also a good brand. Although
we're okay. We can still be friends.
We can still be friends. So just look out for private equity. Just be careful.
Exactly, they're coming. That's why I got one early in case they
go exactly. And there's a bunch of musical instrument categories where you have to buy a vintage instrument because you can't even get they're not making the quality stuff anymore. It's
not
so
anymore.
Sad.
Yeah, I haven't given I've sort of given mine a name, but it wasn't named yet by the industry. But it's so we
anyway. Okay.
About the music addictions we all have later. But let's talk about Mary for now. All right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So go back in time 100 years, more than 100 years now. It's funny. I love this story because I wrote about Frederick Winslow Taylor in the Lean Startup.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah.
It happened to come out the 100th anniversary of like his really critical work, The Principles of Scientific Management, was published in 1911. So I like the symmetry of it being a century of management that we were looking back on. And people today do not understand how famous Fred Taylor was.
Oh.
I mean, he was a monster celebrity in his day.
Yeah, rock star.
Maybe like one of the most famous people alive in his day. And so he became the face of management. Taylorism became the most dominant management idea in America and in a lot of countries around the world for decades. But one of his contemporaries was this woman named Mary Parker Follett. Now, she was so far ahead of her time that I'm going to quote some of her things to you. And just for each one, I want you to think, if you saw that on TikTok yesterday, and I told you this is from, came from some business bestseller, in 2026, would you be like, oh yeah, sure. Absolutely, right? There's not one thing Taylor wrote that you could do that about. It's like, it's super racist and there's all kinds of problems with it, okay? So his work does not stand up in that way. It's more of a like time capsule. Parker, it's like, does she see the future? So like, she would say things like, authority should go with knowledge and experience. So your obedience is due, like no matter where it is, up and down the line, whoever has the knowledge is where you should obey, which at a time of like very rigid hierarchy, social hierarchy as well as economic, like that was like very radical. Her idea was that you should have power with, not power over. She was asked once should subordinates obey their superiors? And she said, no. The subordinate and the superior together obey the law of the situation. They together investigate what the situation is and do what the situation requires. She basically saw workers as a source of wisdom and not just as labor. Whereas Taylorism was like really excited to turn human beings into robots.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
These modern executives you see who are they have a palpable glee at the opportunity to lay off their whole team and replace everybody with AI. Like it's not only gross, but it's just Taylorism reborn. And it's going to have all the same problems that Taylorism had, that you lose something really valuable when you purge all the humanity out of a thing. Anyway, she said that the most essential work of the leader is to create more leaders. Come on, that's TikTok worthy for sure. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
why you can't get that on a t-shirt to this day. It's just
No,
like,
you just have to do a little
incredible.
dance at the end, and that's
Yeah.
like that's 10 million views
So
right
Taylor
there.
became the most famous management guy ever. Follett was utterly erased from history. Like, she was very famous in her day, but like, she was not preserved in the next generation of managers. She was never taught in business schools. Her work was erased, and she had to be rediscovered in the 90s. And when she was rediscovered, like, the really serious management thinkers of that time were all so blown away. Peter Drucker called her the prophet of management, which is the title of one of the really good books that compiles her writings from the 1990s. So the prophet of management, like, she was really an incredible person. The biggest what if, I think, in the whole management canon is, what if the world had listened to her instead of Taylor? What world would we be living in today? Anyway, you asked me about the invisible leader. This is definitely her most important contribution, I think, and maybe her most famous. She would just drive her contemporaries crazy with this. She would say, she really admired this guy named Mr. Roundtree. He would always praise him as a really excellent leader. Like, she would go to these conferences and talk about him as an example of a man. She was like, clearly his, she had been a consultant for his company, right? Like, she thought he was really great. But she would say stuff like this. She would say, Mr. Roundtree, the owner of the Roundtree Chocolate Factory, is not the leader of the Roundtree Chocolate Factory. And people would just be like, his family owns the factory. Like, what, lady, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't make, who, if he's not the leader, who is? She'd be like, glad you asked, because he is a really, like, and don't you praise him all the time? I do praise him all the time. He is a really good leader, but not because his workers follow him, but because he's so good at instilling in them the sense of common purpose. And this sense of common purpose, not Mr. Roundtree himself, is their invisible leader. I just think this is really perfect. If leaders could really internalize this idea, they would finally have an understanding why they are constantly losing control of their own organizations. Because the vast majority of decisions that really matter to customers, to employees, that determine business results, are not made in the boardroom. They are generally made in a room where there are no managers present, in the daily decisions that knowledge workers and factory workers alike have to make. Customer calls in with a weird complaint. Do something about it or find a way to get off the phone. QA brings in an odd, somewhat reproducible bug. Write an automated test and figure it out, or let it go. Bury it. Tell them that they did a bad job with the report. Sales and marketing having a meeting. Someone's like, we could jack up our sales pretty good right now if we just lie about the product's capabilities. Do people say, we don't do that around here? Or do they say, well, no one will, if they'll ask, or do they ask, will we get away with it? As if the answer is yes, then we got to do it, right? So the invisible leader is the person, the metaphorical person who is present when no other leader is present, that helps people figure out, is this the kind of thing we want to do? And if you hear that for the first time, a lot of people feel a sense of tremendous despair. If I'm not the leader, who is? This is ghost? I got to deal with a ghost? Yeah. Not actually bad news, it's good news. You can learn to cultivate this quality in yourself, the quality that Mr. Roundtree had. There's so much chocolate in this book, I don't know why. The quality of Mr. Roundtree, I must have been very hungry while writing it.
I was just sitting there eating chocolate bars all the way through. I put on 12
I wish
kilos.
I should have eaten a lot more chocolate, because we also haven't talked about Cadbury's in the book, and there's a lot of confectionery too, like King Arthur Baking is in there. And
yeah.
a lot of confectionery. Anyway.
I have to, but I really want to underline this, Eric, right? Because it's just this is my jam, this stuff. It's my favorite part of the work that we do. It's like, because the thing for me is that it's not about control, it's about creating the conditions for great things to happen. And one of the challenges I think most leaders probably don't think about is that if you are building great systems inside your company to allow the best ideas win, to allow people to put input, to make decisions while you're not there, right? For some people, that is invisible leadership, but it's also something you can influence, you can set up. And the system generally wins, right? Like how people are going to make
absolutely.
these
How do you build
choices,
those systems is
right?
Is the key
And
question.
even this debate we're having, we're talking about a corporate system that exists that I think we both feel strongly needs to change, or we need to elevate a different picture about what a good system looks like. Because it's not about just maximizing every profit, driving down cost, and being the lowest provider of something to take money home to your shareholders. There's better ways to build businesses that are more fun to be in, that are just as profitable and actually have greater longevity and brand strength over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So power to you for putting all those things together.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's definitely something I've really enjoyed. And I think if we could just go to the leaders one more time, one of the things I think I've really come to understand is that most leaders simply do not understand what their organization is. Which I know sounds like such a philosophical question that people are like, I didn't come into business to learn philosophy, man. But like, you can say you don't care about philosophy, but philosophy cares about you. And if you have a wrong concept in there, it can make your life so much more difficult. And the analogy I would use is, most people, when they go through some kind of education, at some point in their teenage or early 20 years, at some point they'll have a moment of self-awareness where they'll be like, what am I? Am I in a body or I am a body? Late night, we've all debated these kind of things. And you meet people sometimes that are like pure materialists that are just like, don't believe in emergent intelligence or anything else. They're just like, look, I'm in control of my body. I am the one. My brain is in charge here. So my consciousness, I own and control my own body. I have autonomy. And you're like, well, how do you know? Well, I tell my arm to go up, it goes up. I tell it to go down, it goes down. You're like, oh, congratulations. Can you also tell your body to heal a cut? To cure a disease? Can you command it to be healthy? And they're like, oh no. Now, sometimes when people have that insight, they realize there's nothing, you're not in control of your own body. Sometimes people are like, well, I guess there's nothing I can do. In that case, like free will is an illusion. I'm just going to eat Doritos all the time. It's like, well, that's also not right. It's not that your decisions, your choices don't matter. They actually matter a great deal. You have to choose to go to the gym. You have to choose to eat right. That's how you create health. Organizations are the same way. They're alive. They are a category of scientific entity called the emergent intelligence, like an ant colony or like a human body. If you talk to a manager, though, they'll say, that's not true. I'm in control, invisible leader. Fred Taylor would have been like, what is Mary talking about? This is absurd. I am in control because I tell the worker to jump and the worker obeys. I send commands and they are followed. So I'm in charge. It's like, no, congratulations. You have a functioning nervous system. Well done. That's good. You say, oh, it's not good? I think it's really good to have a functioning nervous system. In an emergency, it's very useful to be able to send commands and have them be followed. Great, good job. But what about your organization's health? Can you command it? A lot of leaders think they can. And that's why they get into huge, huge trouble. They simply do not know how to bind the superorganism they lead to care about any specific thing. So just like human health, organizational health can be cultivated, but it cannot be commanded. And once you understand that idea, as Mary Parker Follett did more than 100 years ago, you will see your opportunities for influence over your organization dramatically expand.
Well, I love it, Eric. It's super fun. You've made me laugh. You've made me think about chocolate. You made me remind us how many of us love being musicians and how many fun, we need to keep maybe when they form this band and I'll do some gigs together.
I love it. That's a great idea.
Thank you again for putting all your time and energy into writing Incorruptible. I recommend everybody go out there and get it. It literally is packed with so many of these stories that show a different path maybe than too much of the industry narrative at the moment. And well done putting it together, my man, and thank you very much.
Oh, listen, congrats to you, by the way, on your success and not just like, being a voice of reason in these incredibly opaque systems. Thank you for that. But the new book is also really great. And I was very excited to be a test reader of it too. So I feel like we have to do, like, we haven't really got a chance to like do the crossover conversation about how these books relate to each other, but I certainly found it really interesting. So I think
well, maybe let's.
I'm sure everyone on this podcast has already read it, and they don't need to be told to buy it. But if for some reason you forgot, like, do that. But then obviously, and of course, like and subscribe. Like, you guys know the drill, okay? Don't make Barry have to say it every time. I'm telling you, you got to like and subscribe. Come on, enough of this. Let's go.
Thanks for the hype. I love it. All right.
Yeah, no problem. This is great. Thank you for your time. And obviously, if people want to learn more about Incorruptible, they can go to the incorruptible.co website, and we have all the usual cool stuff, pre-order bonuses, and all the usual things. The book is available wherever books are sold, in hardcover, in ebook, and audiobook. So yeah, appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it and be part of the launch. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you found this episode useful, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Please consider leaving a rating or a review as it helps others find our podcast. For more episode and details about the show, visit barryoreilly.com, and we'll see you on the next episode.